Günaydın, herkese merhaba. Öncelikle bu önemli etkinliğe katılım sağladığınız için teşekkür ederek başlamak istiyorum. Etkinlik dili İngilizce olacağı için ben de konuşmama İngilizce olarak devam edeceğim. Ama program boyunca olabilecek sorularınız için gerek Türkçe gerekse İngilizce olarak soru cevap kısmından eğer yazarsanız sizlere cevap vermeye çalışacağız. Dear participants, first of all, I would like to welcome everyone to this important event. Let me introduce myself first. I am Tarık Şahin. I'm the national contact point for European Innovation Council program. And part of the program, Pathfinder and Transition sub-programs will be covered today by our expert, Mr. Erich Prem. As you know, Turkey has been participating in the EU framework programs as an associated country since FP6, and success of our country is increasing day by day. However, we can also mention that there is still a big room for improvement, especially in the third pillar of the program, namely Innovative Europe. There has been changes in the structure of the framework programs in the transition from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe. I can say that the biggest changes happened in the innovation support programs. First of all, European Innovation Council, of course, has been launched in order to support all kinds of market-oriented projects. Of course, EIC Accelerator is the biggest funding tool of EIC for ready-to-market project ideas. However, from the same market-oriented approach, Commission is also supporting the lower TRL level projects with Pathfinder and transition programs. We see these programs very important, and we believe that there is a great potential in Turkey who can especially target these programs. I will not go through the details of the programs. Of course, our expert, Mr. Erich Prem, will cover all the aspects of the program very detailedly today. I can only mention that you can contact with us as the EIC NCPs for any kind of a support you need. I wish everyone a very fruitful event. Now, I would like to invite Eric for his presentation. Thank you again for participating.
Yes, hello, and thanks for having me. I guess you can hear me well, Tarek? Good?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Very good. Thank you so much. My name is Erich Prem. I'm going to present to you in the next, well, roughly 2 hours and a bit, an overview of the EIC Pathfinder and the EIC transition parts of the innovation program as announced. Maybe 1 or 2 words on my personal background. So by training, I'm a computer scientist. Actually, I used to work in artificial intelligence, but I was also a colleague of Tarek. I used to be the national contact point in the 5th framework program for the ICT program. So that's a long time ago, and since then have had the pleasure of well, being involved in European Commission program in one or the other functions, including as an evaluator. So I hope to provide you a few insights, maybe not always just on the program, maybe also a little bit of, let's say, tips and tricks how to be successful in this program. Although in the end, I'm afraid I don't have any magic words or secrets. In the end, it's all about your ideas. It's all about what you would like to do and how good your ideas are. So in that sense, let me start my presentation. Just a second, please. So Tarek, this is the right screen, right?
Yes, exactly. Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you. So yes, as I said, this is going to be a roughly 2.5-hour presentation about the EIC Pathfinder and the transition parts of the program, and I will share some insights and perspectives. So roughly, what we are going to do is we'll be talking about the EIC Pathfinder program, and I will basically assume you know nothing about it. So don't worry if these terms are new to you. I want to explain what the key features of this program are, who can apply, why you should apply, and I will also talk about when you should not apply. I will briefly mention the size of the grants, talk a little bit about the evaluation criteria and also about the Pathfinder challenges. So I'll first give a short overview that should take me about roughly 20 minutes, and then devote half an hour each to the EIC Pathfinder Open and the two EIC Pathfinder challenges, which are two parts of the program that I'm going to explain. And after that, we'll have I think a question and answer session, and then we'll talk about the EIC transition part of the program. Again, very much the same thing, under which conditions can you apply, why you should apply, size of the grants, evaluation and evaluation criteria, and the transition challenges, of which there are 3. And then again, roughly half an hour for each. Maybe that's going to be a bit shorter because most of the explanation will be in the first part. Now, there is an important disclaimer to make, which is a disclaimer that applies to the whole presentation, and that is that the information I'm going to talk about is based on the draft EIT work program. So the final version has not been published yet, and therefore it is important that you take what I'm going to say with a grain of salt. So please, before submitting a proposal, check against the final publication. I'm sure Tarek will have all the details once the final version of the program is published. Having said that, I think the version of the program that I have at my disposal is fairly stable now, so I wouldn't expect massive changes, but still it's necessary to do this final check. Let me first of all maybe start this by introducing what the original motivation was to create the European Innovation Council and what the program tries to achieve. So it has, I think it's been nowadays common knowledge, more or less, that there is an issue with innovation performance in Europe. The story is that we do have all over Europe quite a strong research performance, but it doesn't always translate into innovation. There are different reasons why this is the case, and I think it has become even a research topic in itself. So some people argue that European researchers are just not focusing on the most interesting topics, or they are just not as interested in bringing their research results to the market. Others have argued that there is a problem with financing. So whatever the reasons are, it is a simple fact, and we still today have a certain lack of breakthrough disruptive innovations that can create new markets. And so this is one of the motivations that you need to understand when thinking about the European Innovation Council. And the second one I already mentioned is innovation funding. So there is this apparent financing gap in Europe in moving new technologies from the lab to the enterprise, or creating new enterprises, whatever the way of innovation may be. And this is also something that the EIC is trying to address. It's not only that, so it's not only this, let's say, this initial funding, it's also about scaling up for higher risk innovative startups, and I'll talk a little bit about it. Thirdly, one might argue that there is a certain challenge in the European innovation ecosystem. So while we do have many national and local ecosystems all over Europe, and some of them may even be well known and famous, but it is still fair to say, well, they are pretty fragmented at EU level. So at national level, that looks a bit different. But when you take a perspective at the pan-European perspective, then I think it is fair to say that there are still challenges in the innovation ecosystem, especially, for example, when it comes to innovation across borders, in policies that seamlessly work together. So there is a good reason to think about how to improve that and how to support innovative researchers, innovative entrepreneurs, with a need to include all regions and talent from wherever they are. And here in brackets, it says especially female, because of course we do have a shortage of female entrepreneurs still. We do have a shortage of female tech engineers by and large, not in every country, but in many countries. So this is also something that the EIC wants to address. Now, something weird is happening. Okay. So the European Innovation Council was founded as a very large initiative, as a program to identify, develop, and scale up breakthroughs and disruptive innovations in Europe. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what breakthrough means, what disruptive innovations could be in this context. Its aim was originally to be unique in the world in its effort to combine, on the one hand, research on emerging technologies with the more, let's say, not quite market-oriented, but towards the market-oriented acceleration for startups, SMEs, and scale-ups. So it's in the end, the EIC fund aims to be a large venture capital deep tech investor in Europe. Now, having said that, of course, it's not a venture capitalist, so it's not. It doesn't take shares for the most part in startup companies, but it aims to close this funding gap in venture capital that, without any doubt, exists in large parts of Europe. For example, especially in the country I'm from, here in Austria. It has an innovator-centric steering board. It tries to also by this take a very proactive approach with a flexible funding system. So it aims, at least it aspires to be more than just a funding program. It also tries to actively manage its program portfolio. This is something that projects can benefit from, but it may be also something that you need to think about a little bit when you are preparing your proposal, because in the end, from the point of view of the European Innovation Council, it's not just about single projects. Single projects are always great to have, and it's always good to have a success. But in the end, it's about the whole thing, about really bringing together the right projects, the right people, the right actors, so that innovative change is possible. And so basically there are three important parts, which I'm not going to talk about. There is the European Institute of Technologies, there is other European innovation ecosystems, and then there is the European Innovation Council, of which I'm going to cover only a certain part, because the activities there, as Tarek already very briefly mentioned, go beyond what I'm going to explain. So in the end, when the European Innovation Council was created, the idea was really to develop something that becomes a one-stop shop for breakthrough, deep tech, market-creating innovation. So this sounds a bit like policy speech, but really it summarizes what the EIC wants to be. It targets breakthrough innovation. So we are not so much interested here in this program in smaller incremental innovations. It's really about things that mean a change in many dimensions. It's about technology. It is a technology-oriented program, but it also eyes the market and innovations for the market. So in principle, it's open to all innovators, meaning all types of organizations and people who are involved in innovation. It also addresses all fields of technology. Some of you may remember days when a similar initiative, the Future and Emerging Technologies Initiative, was mostly focusing on digital technologies. So that is no longer the case here. Now we are talking about all sorts of fields. It includes targeted strategic funding in topical fields. What does that mean? So there are also activities where the European Institute, the EIC, actually identifies areas where it thinks, so this would be really interesting topics, this is something where we need innovation, and then produces calls for projects that address these topics. Going to talk a little bit more about this. But it is also a highly competitive program that is fairly clear. It's not easy money. Unfortunately, it is something that is a little bit also of an excellence mark still. So in that sense, it's a challenging program. What it tries to do is it tries to provide agile funding from the very early stages of a technology to really the investment. So this is why there are several parts of the program. They're basically sorted by maturity of the technology. So in the very early stages, there is the Pathfinder part, which addresses advanced research on emerging technologies. And then there's the transition part, which tries to fund the transition phase, where these first technologies, where maybe you have a prototype, maybe you have a proof of concept, and take that to a more commercial setting. Now, at this point, maybe already it's worth noting that this is a very linear way of looking at things that may also be criticized, you know. So there is this classical idea, you're sitting in the lab, you're developing, you have a research project, and then someone takes it to the next step. It matures the technology so that there is maybe an industry prototype, and then there is another phase of maturation where you're trying to reach a greater market with a more mature technology, with, in this case, the accelerator scheme that I'm not going to talk about. So this is a very linear way of looking at it. And I think it's fair to say, and we should keep this in mind when looking at the program, that different areas of technology are very different with respect to whether that is actually linear to that extent. What I mean is the following. In biotechnology, I think this is a usual way of how innovation works, simply because biotech is something that very often is conceived in a lab, literally, and then is taken to a more mature industrial phase and needs to go through a lot of maybe regulatory steps and industrial growth steps. Whereas, for example, digital technologies have maybe shorter paths where this is all happening maybe in parallel or much faster, and typically you're not developing digital technologies, or at least not all of them, in a lab. So things can be different, but this is the way it's set up, and I think it addresses, it's very clear in how it's structured. And thirdly, as I said, so there is also this idea of building ecosystems where the EIC also aims to offer things that maybe are more than just funding. It offers access to business acceleration services, such as maybe mentors or knowledge. It also, which is perhaps a bit different from other programs, it also has program managers that take an active role and are also encouraged to take an active role in shaping the program portfolios. So there is an active program management, which is nice to have when you are part of the portfolio. And also, of course, they try and find other investors. They try to talk to people who maybe are also interested. So there's there is really an active component here, which is, I think, largely different from other parts of the program that perhaps are more top-down or more bureaucratic. Now, when we look at the current version of the EIC work program, and that I mean the one that will address the calls for the year 2023, so next year, the structure is pretty much the same as in this year's program. So roughly a year ago, you could, well, not quite, because it was only published early this year. There was the EIC Work Program 2022 that provided the community with a description of the calls for this year, and there were calls already this year, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the results. But now we are preparing the new work program for next year, which has the structure as it is depicted here. So it's kind of a complex structure because it has so many different parts, which is due to what I just explained, that they try to really address the whole value chain, if you like, in research. I am going to focus exclusively on the two first parts, which are also the two first parts in the program document, the EIC Pathfinder part of the program and the EIC transition part, both of which have an open and a challenge-driven part. So in total, I'm going to cover 4 parts. But in the EIC work program, there are other activities described. There is an EIC accelerator part, which also has the structure of open and a challenge-based part. There are business acceleration services. There is an EIC prize and some other activities. So don't be too confused. Actually, I think when you look at the work program document, I think it's fairly well structured. They really made an effort to make this simple and understandable. So I think this is a document. I wouldn't say it's a pleasure reading it, but I think it's fairly clear, straightforward, and they try to use very clear language. So what has happened so far? So there have been a few calls in the past. I'm going to present 2 results here. So one call, which was, I would say, like the first call, if you want, which had a deadline in October 2021, already showed quite an interesting, let's say, portfolio of projects. So at that time, roughly a bit more than 400 projects were submitted from all over Europe, from 27 countries actually, of which 39 projects were chosen, so roughly 1 in 10. That is, I think that's not such a bad ratio, given that the effort to write the proposal is not as bad as in some other programs of the European Commission. So those of you who have been participants in let's say, framework program projects know that some of the proposals can be, well, roughly 100 pages. And it's really an effort to write them, to prepare them. It's a multi-person effort. It takes a lot of work to get it done. And I'm not saying that the EIC projects are any, let's say, easier in the end, because sometimes it may be more difficult to write a short proposal that's really good than to write a long one. But 1 in 10 is in the end, or was in the October call of the EIC program, was the ratio, and I don't think it's a bad ratio. So the average grant granted to a project then was 3.7 million. And in the end, you had 214 participants in these projects, where roughly half of them were higher education. So basically that means universities, which is unsurprising in a research program, but also roughly a quarter of the participants were private organizations. Not all of them may be companies, some of them may be also private research organizations, but these are mostly companies, I would say, and then roughly a fifth other research organizations, such as national institutes or so, that are not universities. and then some others. But you see that mostly it's universities, companies, and research institutes that participate in the program. If you're interested in the detail, I took this data from the European Innovation Council's website. Now, in that 2021 call, let us just have a quick look on one part of the EIC Pathfinder Challenges program, and I'll explain in a minute what that really is. There were these projects funded, which really were in response to a challenge. And so when you look at the title of the projects, that ranges from social competences of virtual agents, so this is largely artificial intelligence, to value-aware artificial intelligence, I guess an ethical project, to smart building, sensitive to daily sentiment, to an emergent awareness for minimal collectives, context-aware adaptive visualizations for critical decision-making, counterfactual assessment and valuation for awareness architectures, and symbolic logic framework for situational awareness. So you see, these are fairly research-driven topics here, which is this part of the program. The Pathfinder program is a very early stage activity, so that's unsurprising that these titles sound very much like, well, let's say conventional research project. But in the end, they are targeting technologies, the development of new technologies that at least have a chance, or for which you can have the vision to address markets in the end. You also see how long these projects usually run. So they are roughly on the order of between 36 and 48 months, so relatively long projects, and on the order of 3.5 million on average. So that gives you an estimate of what this part of the program looked like at that time, at least. Now, let me show you a very concrete example, also one that you can find online. Here's the link. If you're interested, it's called the MiniGraph project. That is an EIC Pathfinder challenge grant to develop breakthrough neurotechnologies for brain interfaces. So you see already here what the flavor of this type of research is. It is, I wouldn't call it science fiction, but it is a bit, well, let's say it has a vision of something that is very much in the future. So this project was a bit larger. It was funded 5.2 million euros. It's a consortium that includes neuroelectronics expertise. There includes a spin-off company from ICN2, and also it develops graphene-based implants with the aim of treating neurological diseases. Actually, when you look at the portfolio, my personal opinion is there is quite a bit of medical technologies there. There's quite a bit of also cancer research. So that's maybe interesting. But really, the project aims to develop groundbreaking brain neurotechnology for neuromodulation, with the vision of actually changing therapies, with having, for example, much more personalized and adaptive brain stimulation techniques that can address certain neurological deficits. And this technology will be developed in the project. It also will be validated, but validated more, let's say, at a lab level. This is not a validation that at that point will hit the broad market. It stops basically with a working prototype, more, perhaps in this case, more a research prototype. So this is one example of the project. The project, I think, has already started, but there is not much more information about it online. Let me briefly mention the newest, the latest results, which you can find online. So this is the cutoff date also for the Pathfinder Open projects here, submitted by May 2020. so May this year. At that time, 858 proposals were evaluated, of which 57 were chosen. So yeah, roughly the same. It's not quite 1 in 10. It's a bit less, with more countries, 29 countries, and a little less average funding, 3.2 million. More or less, roughly the same composition of consortia. Again, roughly half of them university institutes, a quarter of the participants research organizations, and about a fifth here non-research private organizations. So that may be mostly companies. It could also be, for example, associations that involve users, or it could be other entities participating in the project. So I think, so now you have an idea of what this program looks like, what it does, what the results are in terms of the portfolio that is being created here. So if there is actually a good website that describes what the European Innovation Council does. Here is the link. And you can see here that it describes the Pathfinder part of the program. There's a section for the transition part, the accelerator part. So all of that which you find in the work program is also online. And there is a bit of background information, such as the one that I've shown to you. There is information about some of the successful projects, not direct links to the projects. The one that I have mentioned here, I found myself. But there are these links to overview tables of the projects that have been funded, have been selected for funding, I should say. So this would conclude my first introduction and overview into the general, let's say, structure. And I think we could have a few questions. I see there are a few in the chat, but I do not have the answers ready. So the one question was, how many were women innovators? I think it is very few. I don't know how many are represented in the program. I'm not sure that Tarek would have this answer, but my guess would be it's around 15% at most.
Actually, no, I also don't have these numbers.
Yeah. It's a very difficult question.
Yeah, exactly.
So then there is a question about the chance of a single entity proposal. I will probably come back to this question when I discuss the composition. So in not always, but in some areas, single entity proposals are allowed. And I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, and maybe I can talk about it a bit later. I think, although it's possible, it's maybe not something you should do or want to do. You know, it's from the whole idea of the program. There is also this interdisciplinary component, bringing together competencies from different areas and combining them in an EIC project. And that is very difficult to argue if you just one single proposer. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's, yeah, I think you have to position yourself also like an evaluator and look at it. And when you compare all these proposals, and then you have one that comes just from a single entity, there is a risk that you would automatically say, okay, this is just one company. Really, I would appreciate more these projects that bring together different players from different entities. Some have the knowledge, some know how the market works. There are users. So, you know, it's about, as always in proposal writing, it's also about the narrative, and not just the narrative. It's also, I think, bringing together the right people. So in that sense, you're always limiting yourself in a way if you are just a single proposer. Then there is this question about bioeconomy, AI, and digitalization are supported higher in funds. None of them is answer for our emergency current problems like climate change. Well, that is arguable, I believe. I think some of the Pathfinder challenges and also some of the challenges I'm going to talk about will actually try to find solutions that are very much driven by digitalization, and they do address climate change. So there is this link, whether you believe in it or not, whether it will actually work is an empirical question, I think. But I think that there are, in the recent work program, actually, the EIC makes an effort to address also climate change, for example. I do not have good examples from Turkey, and again, I have to ask Tarek maybe about Turkish participation.
Yes, from the start of the Horizon Europe, we have two projects. One is supported under Pathfinder, and the other one is supported under Transition with Turkish coordinators, I mean. And if they send me an email, I can share the details, information of these projects. And I am, as an answer, I'm writing my email address.
Okay, wonderful. Let me maybe add my own experience here. Even if Turkey had no participation, don't be discouraged by this. I have been an evaluator myself very often. I can assure you that when you are evaluating the proposal, we are usually far less interested in where the people come from than you may think. Yeah, most of the hardcore discussions when proposals are evaluated are about the content. Is this the right partner in terms of competencies? It is really, there is sometimes some evaluators may try to bring up pan-European coverage or other things, but this is not very much appreciated in the debate. Really, the focus is very much on content. What is this project about? What is it trying to achieve? Is this interesting? Is this important? And who are the partners? So don't be discouraged. Quite to the contrary. It may be easier to join a consortium than to be coordinating one, but that is a different question altogether. I will talk about the consortium structure, so I'm going to postpone this question. What is the policy for university intellectual property policies? I'm not going to talk about this. It is the most important part that you need to understand is that the EIC is really interested that IP is protected and that the consortium has a good understanding of what it would like to do with the intellectual property. From the side of the program, there are few practical constraints. The one real interest is that the IP doesn't disappear somewhere and is not being used. That is the number one interest. Everything else can mostly be regulated. And there is a Turkish question which I cannot answer.
Yeah, I can answer. He is asking if we can share the presentations, and
yes,
I think this. Yeah, okay, great to know that. Then I'm forwarding this question to the team, Selin and Kemal. Mm-hmm. If possible, they can share the presentations with the participants.
And Tarek, also to be entirely sure, a partner country member can, of course, be consortium leader, as you just said.
Yeah, they can be a consortium. Yeah. We can be the partners from Turkey can also be the consortium leaders, the coordinators. Yes.
And what is your suggestion? Should the leader be a member from the EC? No, that doesn't matter. The most important question is competence, and of course following the formal rules. But otherwise, no. It really doesn't matter. It should be a credible organization. So my recommendation is to have a credible coordinator. I think, especially for Pathfinder Open, this should be someone who understands the technology, who knows what's going on, and has credible experience in managing such projects or similar projects. So it's not so much about the where the organization is from. It is really about competence. It could also be a company. I think that is also fine. Of course, when it is a company, then you may have to think a bit more carefully about that there is, that not everybody is just working towards that company, unless this makes sense for the proposal. But as I said, it's more important to have the right people, the right competences involved. Okay, are there any other questions? If not, I believe we are quite good in time. There is, it's a bit confusing because there's two windows, and there are Turkish statements in the chat, but I believe they are not questions.
Yes, we reminded people the presentations will be shared with them later on after the event.
Yes.
We encourage them to ask their questions via Q&A button.
Cool. So I think then we have addressed all questions or postponed the answers at least, and I think we are spot on time if I'm not wrong, and can start with the EIC Pathfinder Open, right? Good. Okay. So EIC Pathfinder. As I said, there are two parts of each of those two parts, and the Pathfinder has an open part and a challenges part. That has been actually a tradition in let's say this type of research for I think probably at least a decade if you include the future and emerging technologies part of the program. So there has always been like an open part which is like a search process where the funding agency says, look, whatever idea you have, bring it on, we'll look at it. And a second part where the European Commission or whichever agency that it tasks with that organizes a process. It's a complicated process or a difficult process in a sense, where experts sit together and say, look, here are some topics where we believe we need innovation, where we believe something should be done. Yeah, so these are the two parts of the program, both from the point of view of the agency are actually quite challenging, I think. So the Pathfinder Open part, or previously the FET Open part, if you know that, has the challenge that it is very difficult for the agency to see what's coming, because before the submission deadline, they do not know what will be submitted. So that makes it very hard for them to, for example, identify who are the evaluators going to be. What do I need in terms of competences for looking at the proposal? That's really not easy. They need to then react relatively quickly to whatever is sent to them. And on the EIC challenges part, it's the opposite problem. You starting from scratch, from the wide open, you want to identify a handful of topics where you think, well, here it could really make sense. And this the way this is organized is usually there are expert groups, there are hearings, people. There is also, it's fair to say, I believe, there is also a good level of lobbying where certain groups would suggest the topic and say, look, this is something where we believe this should be done. And I'm mentioning this also maybe a little bit to motivate those of you who are, let's say, professional researchers, for example, to also get involved in these processes, to be a part of this for two reasons. One is you will understand how the system works. Actually, there are more than two reasons. Secondly, you will get insights into the trends and maybe talk to interesting people in this process and also learn something about what other people are doing and what they are thinking, which is quite interesting because this is before they are doing the research. This is when they are still thinking about the topics. And thirdly, of course, it makes it easier to find your way into these topics. So for example, become an expert evaluator. That is a very helpful thing, but also become an expert in those rounds. Talk to your national agency when you have really ideas, and it's all about communication. And no, of course, it costs time, and no one has time these days. But a certain degree of involvement, I think, can be really beneficial. So EIC Pathfinder Open, as I said, is the part of the program where you can submit any topic. It's bottom up. And the EIC Pathfinder Challenges part of the program is top down, where the EIC defines challenges, tackling specific technology breakthroughs with the aim of then having portfolios of projects, not just one project, portfolios of projects that address the issues. In some other parts of the framework program, sometimes you have calls where actually then they're looking for one project. This is not the case here. So really, usually there is a selection of a portfolio of projects that cover different aspects of this challenge, with the hope that in total these projects will make a significant step ahead, significant progress. So Pathfinder Open, I think this is probably the most interesting part of the program for most of you. Who is it really for? So in the program, the EIC describes relatively clearly what this is, but I will talk quite a bit about it, because I think if you haven't heard about it, there is a danger you misinterpret what it is really about. So one question that you need to ask yourself if you think of submitting an idea to the Pathfinder Open part of the program is, do you have a convincing, but that should always be the case, a vision of a radically new technology that could make a real difference to our lives? Part of this is my formulation. You could also say that has transformative positive effects on economy and society. Why I think this is a bit difficult is because even a small incremental change may make a real difference, you know. So as much as these words are trying to get across the message, I think it's not that easy. That what the EIC is really looking for is some radical idea. It is something that I wouldn't say has never been addressed, but that has been rarely addressed, that has been only maybe conceptualized, that hasn't been followed through, that didn't look really promising. Maybe now we have new aspects of this technology. Maybe now we can think of it. Maybe we can now really solve a problem that couldn't be solved before. So is there a concrete, novel and ambitious science towards technology breakthrough that provides advancement towards this technology? And I think maybe this describes it better for some of you, this science to technology breakthrough. So we're talking about technology, but then again, technology that maybe sits on or arises from, grows from scientific insights that are novel, or maybe old, but we didn't have technology to take them on board, to turn them into something that addresses an issue. Is there high risk, high gain research associated or necessary in order to address this technology, in order to develop this technology? So is there research that, of course, should be real research? And what does that mean? Real research is something where in the end it could also not work, where in the end maybe we find out that this cannot work, it cannot be done, it cannot maybe be done to a sufficient degree, maybe we cannot make a part of the technology work, maybe it is not, it's an order of magnitude worse than what we were hoping for. maybe something else comes from it, but so this is research. Research is when there is an open question, when there is something that we do not yet know. For an open Pathfinder project, it is important that a certain part of this is risky in the sense that, not risky in the sense that it is dangerous, but risky in the sense that the answer may also be no. Yeah? But of course, as always in research, and most of you will be researchers and will know that researchers will always argue they can do it, and they have good reasons to believe that they can do it. There is, especially from my experience in biotech and medicine, it nearly seems as you would have to have already done half the research in order to get the research funded. Maybe that is a bit different in other technologies. In computing, in the computing sciences, sometimes the guesses are a bit wilder, but in the end, this is the character. You want risky research that could also go wrong, while at the same time you have some reasons to believe that it works. And then very often, what you will actually need is an interdisciplinary team of researchers and innovators to at least realize a proof of principle, a proof of concept, to validate the scientific basis of this new technological approach. What precisely interdisciplinarity means is a difficult question, and that depends very much on the type of research. Sometimes the interdisciplinarity is not so much between different fields. Sometimes it is actually, let's say within computing, maybe you need a cryptography expert, and you need a user interface expert, and you need an expert for communication protocols. So these are all computer science experts in the end, but they are kind of different disciplines. And maybe for some projects, this would be interdisciplinary enough. While for some other research, I don't know, maybe a medical project in social medicine would need experts in cancer research, plus also, you know, demographers and maybe social scientists, and this is an entirely different level of interdisciplinarity. So what precisely interdisciplinarity is a bit tricky. If for those of you who are familiar with the Future and Emerging Technology program, I would just like to summarize that EIC Pathfinder Open is similar, but it is also a bit different. The flavor is a bit different. It's if anything, it is maybe a bit more, it's perhaps a bit more market oriented, but that's also, I wouldn't want to argue with EIC representatives on that. So in the end, why would you want to apply? Of course, it's the money. So really what you get is funding for realizing a fairly ambitious vision for radically new technology. It is really for early stage development. And I think for the companies listening to this presentation, this is really important to keep in mind. The Pathfinder Open is not a program to bring things quickly to the market. It is still technological research. We are talking about technology readiness levels 1 to 4, and I'm going to explain in a few slides what that is. And it is really about early stages of technologies, or if a different way of formulating it would be to say, this is the foundation of the technology that you are envisioning. So maybe it's not even really the technology, maybe it's just the foundation so that you can then realize the technology. So this is for novel and ambitious science toward technology breakthroughs. That's the aim. That's in a sense what's a must. That's what you need to aim at in a Pathfinder Open project. So here's what I said. So for the expected technology readiness level for an EIC Pathfinder project is anything between the basic principles and a technology that is validated in the lab. So it doesn't mean you have to address all 4 levels. Very well, it could just be an experimental proof of concept of something that has never been proven before. It could also be maybe stop there and doesn't have to go to the technology validated in the lab. However, having said that, I think most evaluators would appreciate if you kind of stop there. But definitely what you have to show in your proposal is how you are progressing from, let's say, level 1 to 2 to 3 throughout your project, or from 2 to 3 to 4 in terms of technology readiness level. So this is important. This is really what we want to see in a project. We want to understand how and why you are moving along the technology maturity, how you're making the technology more mature based on the science insights that you are going to gain in the project. What I just said about high-risk research, I think it's important to emphasize that you can also try out things even when they don't work. So I work a lot with projects that in early stages of when they conceptualize project ideas. And very often I realize how afraid, especially researchers, are of promising things that in the end may not work. But really, in the EIC Pathfinder project, there needs to be a certain risk level. So you need to be ready to try out things with the risk that they probably don't work. Yeah. Now, of course, then the question that always comes is, but we cannot promise things that we don't know that will work. You are not promising. This is a project. You are trying out things, and trying out means usually you also have a plan B. You also have an understanding, okay, if this doesn't work, then what we could try is this, or if we don't achieve 10 orders of magnitude, then maybe we achieve 5 orders of magnitude of progress. So I think this is the way you need to understand this. This is not a promise, it's a project. It's something that you are trying out. And you need to be, as I said, give new answers, giving answers, maybe questions that no one has asked before. That would be optimum, but maybe also trying to develop different answers to existing questions. You are addressing aspects of the problem that you certainly do not yet master. So it's also quite important. This is not for something that you already know how to do it. No, it's about you want to find out how to do it. You want to prove that it can be done in this way in which you're imagining it. So on the contrary, if the approach that you're proposing in a Pathfinder project is just the logic next step, the evaluators will probably not support your idea. So it's really about novel ideas, trying out things where we don't have an answer yet, but which look promising. There needs, of course, be some argument. So when you're trying to question yourself, should I go for the EIC Pathfinder? There are some indicators that should help you in answering the question. One would be, is this collaborative interdisciplinary research? So is it necessary to bring together different expertise in order to answer the question? If the answer is no, if you could do it on your own, then maybe the Pathfinder is not such a good choice. I'm not saying it's not a categorical no, but it's something where I would argue maybe there are also simpler ways than going for the Pathfinder Open. Do you have a convincing vision? What is a vision? A vision is an end state, is a state that describes what you want to do at the end. It's a vision of how you are changing business, how you're changing society, how you're changing the environment, how you're changing democracy. I don't know, whatever it is that you want to change, but that has a transformative, positive effect on economy and society. And this is really important. It's quite, you need to understand how the world should look after the end of the project. And of course, then it is still technology development. So it is still, there is still an aspect of, if I was critical, I would say of solutionism, of technical solutionism. So there is still an aspect, of course, that we are believing in science towards technology breakthroughs. We are believing that there are better technologies. We can do things better than we do them today, which I guess in most cases is a true belief. And then, yeah, as I said, there is a certain high risk, high gain idea. So this can be risky. It may not work, but if it works, it's really great. Yeah. So the risk is a must. It's not a problem. When at the end of the project, of a Pathfinder project, what you should have is typically a proof of principle. So it should be something where we now know, different from before, that the main ideas of the technology are feasible. We can make it work. Very often the open questions that will remain are, can we also make an industrial process out of it? Can this work in real world environments? Can we do this such that it's also affordable, such that it's commercially interesting? So some of those questions may remain open, but at least the technical feasibility, the doability should be clarified. We should have projects that in the end take also the necessary measures to follow up. So it should not just be a research prototype and then that's the end of it. There should already be in the project measures to taking the next step of making the vision happen. So I think this is maybe also an underestimated Pathfinder open characteristic, because really what you want to do is you want to not just prove the technology, but you want to also make sure that this technology is taken up, that it's followed through with it, that it can be pursued. And a good way of realizing this is that when you're developing this early stage of the technology, you already make sure that the intellectual property is protected. You make sure that you're involving the right people. That could be the right industries. Maybe you even want to scan for other industries where this could also be applied. Maybe you want to bring this to a new startup that can then work with the technology and bring this to the market. So there are different ways depending on the technology, depending on what you're addressing in terms of application. But this needs to be considered already at an early stage, and this is quite important. That for many researchers who may be in the audience today, this may also mean maybe going a little bit out of their comfort zone, maybe addressing IP more than they usually want to address it, maybe talking to business people a bit more than they want to talk to them, and maybe also involving industry a bit more than what they are used to. But the projects are in the end, definitely encouraged to involve those key actors. And what's a key actor? A key actor is not just someone who contributes to the technology. So these are the most important ones. You need to make sure, this is an absolute must in the project, that all the competences for realizing the project are there. Don't submit the proposal if you do not have all the competences in this. This makes no sense. Yeah, you need to make sure that technologically all the competences are there, whatever that is. This can be anything from pure mathematics to a sociologist, whatever you need for the project to technically work. But in addition, you may also want to involve, maybe in a smaller role, maybe just for communication, maybe just in an advisory role, people who understand where this technology could go in the industry, how to bring it to a future envisaged market. I think this is really the point that evaluators would also be looking for. I think in the proposal it says that key actors that have the potential to become future leaders. That is maybe a bit policy speech, but nevertheless, I think you want people who are credible in taking this to the market and really having an impact. So this is a bit of a difficult decision to make, because while it is true that your proposal should be far-reaching, it should be visionary, it also, you don't have to do everything in the first Pathfinder Open project. Where you draw the boundary between let's say, developing the technology and developing the market is a difficult choice. That depends. I cannot answer this for you. In fact, no one can. You have to think about this. You need to understand the market and the technology, at least insofar as being realistic about what you can achieve in 3 or 4 years. And I think this is a difficult decision to make. But as I said, perhaps the most important message is that you have the basis of the technology for sure, and then you have roots into potential marketing also present in your project, because in the end, the whole program exists to strengthen Europe's capacity for exploiting scientific discoveries, what I explained in the first part of my talk. That's the raison d'être of the whole initiative. So typically a consortium, if you want to come for a Pathfinder Open, a consortium has to include at least 3 independent legal entities. And these legal entities can be all sorts of organizations, universities, research organizations, SMEs, startups, industrial partners, or even natural persons. But please refer to the details that are given in Annex 2. I'm not a specialist here. That also changes from time to time. So your national contact point is the perfect address to contact. They know all the rules. They know the bureaucratic details. But you should think about this. Now, a different question would be, is 3 a good number? And again, I would say that very much depends on your project. My feeling and my experience is that typically consortia tend to grow much faster than perhaps it's wise. Many of the projects tend to, when you think about them, quickly grow to 6, 7, 8, and maybe more participants. At an early stage of a technology, that may not be the best idea. It's again very difficult to say. It depends a lot whether that is physics, hardcore physics, or whether it's experimental, some experimental engineering technology, whether it's IT, or that's all very different. But in the end, you want something manageable. You want maybe only a handful of partners is maybe a good way of looking at things. 3 is certainly viable. It is certainly possible. But 7 is also fine. Yeah. So this is not an easy answer. What will you get? So you will get a grant, a research grant, where you have eligible costs in the call that will be opened presumably very soon, and where you can submit proposals as early as March, if from the top of my head now. You will be able to get roughly up to 4 million for your project. But that's not a fixed budget line. So that is just to give you an idea of what the project should look like. It is not saying you must come with 4 million, and it is not saying you cannot ask for 5 million. It will tell you that probably 10 million is too much. And it may also be that 1 million is not big enough. But it really depends on the project. Sometimes small projects have a good chance because when there is some leftover budget, they actually progress to the top of the list. Sometimes evaluators, and those of you who have been evaluating proposals will know that sometimes we also, of course, implicitly estimate value for money, because it's always about comparing things. But really, an order of 3 to 4 million is a good size proposal. Also to keep it manageable, also to in terms of what you can do in 3 to 4 years. This is a reasonable size. So I think that gives you good indication. Oh yeah, and totally there is roughly 180 million envisaged for this as an indicative budget for that call. I said before that the EIC also tries to do a bit more than just create a research project. So there are some other grants from which you may benefit as an EIC Pathfinder Open project. So, for example, you can receive additional booster grants up to 3 per project. So I think that is actually quite interesting. With fixed amounts of up to 50,000 euros. This can be complementary activities for commercialization, for example, for portfolio activities. That means basically bringing together different projects in the call or also between calls that do similar things or that could benefit from working together. Then there can be an EIC transition projects. You can have an EIC accelerator grant and some other schemes. I'm not going into the details here, but there are some additional benefits of having a Pathfinder open project. Now, details of the application. I don't want to talk too much about it. Maybe just enough at this stage for you to decide whether that is something that you should go for. Of course, you must submit by the deadline. It is currently envisaged that this will be early in March. And I think this is an important information. Now it is November, so theoretically you may think, well, you have all of November, December, January, and February to write this proposal. So 4 months, that's a lot of time. That is not so. If you really want to submit, you need to start now. Yeah, that's basically it. You need to make sure that you're looking for the partners now, that you're trying to contact your partners with whom you would like to work, especially nowadays where it has become really tricky that people find the time. I think now is the right time to exchange your ideas, to talk to your partners about submitting a proposal. The writing itself is not bad. It is approximately 17 pages for the main technical section of the proposal. So that's not the point. The point is really convincingly describing your idea and in the first place having a good idea. The process itself is fairly quick, I think. So usually you should be informed within 5 months after the call deadline about the results, and you can expect to sign a grant agreement on the order of 8 months after the call deadline, which is also fairly quick. Actually, for some people, this is too quick. Very often, well, not very often, but sometimes people are a bit shocked, but because then they need to reshuffle the other projects on which they are working. And so I think it's a fairly, for such an early stage type of program, it's a fairly quick schedule here that will maybe also provide its own challenges. In terms of the decision procedure, so as I said, roughly 5 months before you are informed, there is an individual expert assessment phase that is performed remotely usually. Then there is even a rebuttal phase where the projects can answer to whatever the individual evaluators stated about their project. Then there is another evaluation phase and the feedback given to the proposers, just so that you roughly understand what's going on here. And why it takes 5 months, but actually, as I said, I think that's fairly quick. Maybe this rebuttal phase is something that is not very often done, at least not in all projects. So here in the EIC funding schemes, typically you get an opportunity to reply to the evaluator comments. You cannot change the project. That is very important. You can only explain misunderstandings, maybe also correct factual errors that the assessors made when looking at your proposals. And the evaluation committee will take your reply into consideration. But as I said, this is not meant to be an improvement of your project. It's only an explanation. So I think that's in principle a good idea. I don't know how they manage it in practice. I would be interested to learn that, but that's at least it looks like a good idea. In terms of evaluation, very quickly, there is an individual remote phase in the beginning where at least, or typically, 4 evaluators evaluate the proposal. with respect to 3 evaluation criteria. They look at excellence, they look at impact, and then quality of the implementation. So this is not surprising, I think, for anybody who has worked in the context of EU research and many other research programs. In fact, it's the quality of the research itself, it's what it could create if it worked, and then how is the project set up? Is this organized well enough? And these are the main criteria that evaluators strictly follow. Actually, they, as I will show you in a moment, they have a more detailed steps to follow. And then there is an algorithm to come up with a score, which is based on the individual scores, and that's it. That's how your proposal is assessed. So here are the criteria, and the most important one is, of course, as you would expect in the type of research program that I have explained, is of course excellence. So really, this is first of all about the long-term vision. How convincing is the vision that you are presenting? Then science towards technology breakthrough. Is this a concrete, novel, and ambitious proposal with respect to what already exists, what has already been done before? Do you have concrete objectives in mind? Is this plausible? Is this credible? Is this measurable? Is there a sound methodology how you are addressing the problem? And interdisciplinarity, are you bringing together the right competences? Let me say a little bit more about this. I mean, very often, as I said, I'm a frequent evaluator in all sorts of programs, and it is surprising how difficult it is sometimes for researchers to clearly state what they want to do and what their vision is of the future. I don't know where this comes from, but as an evaluator, it is really sometimes puzzling that there is a lack of clarity in what the researchers are trying to achieve. And maybe there's one explanation for this. So maybe there is, in this type of research, really you need to have a vision. You need to understand what is the change that you are trying to induce in the world with your research, not just the research itself. That I think is an important difference between a basic research program, that like an academic research program, and this type of research. It's not just about furthering research. It's also about having this vision and making it clear. So it's not about just being novel and being a good researcher. It is also about really understanding the impacts of that research and having a vision of what you want to achieve as a social, environmental change, whatever, business change, whatever it is that you want to change. And I think this is really important. So it's also about making sure that what you're doing and pointing out to the evaluators that this is important. It's not just about you can do it and then this would be a great step research-wise, but also it's an important step. It's actually furthering the economy. It's actually furthering our society. That is what it's about, and this is really important. And as you can see, there is a threshold. So if you don't achieve a minimum of 4 out of 5 points, then you're out. And this is the most important criterion. This is 60% of the weighted average. So this is where you need to invest your time. This needs to be excellent in order to be successful. Then there are 2 other criteria. This is the impact, where you are precisely describing, in the case that you are successful with your technology, what are the transformative effects that you are expecting, and you need to describe why. You're not just claiming wildly that we will be saving all the energy in Europe because of your technological improvement. You need to understand a little bit what's the order of magnitude, what are your best guesses. Of course, at the time, this may be guesses, but as an evaluator, I want to see that you understand the consequences of your technology, that you understand of what this means to society. And of course, because this is not just a research program, what the innovation potential is. How could this actually work? How will you make a business out of it? Or how will it otherwise be brought to the market? Why is this not ending up in your drawer or filing a patent only? How can we develop this into something that is actually used, that people pay for, that makes its way into the market? And that doesn't necessarily have to be done in your project, but you need to understand how it could work. And then, of course, the usual communication and dissemination. What are the measures you take in order to make sure you talk to the right people, you inform them, maybe you bring in additional competences, and so on and so forth. I think that's maybe more straightforward, but you see the weight of this is only 20%. So really the excellence is where the game is being played, and the threshold is 3.5 here. And then we have another 20% for the quality and efficiency of the implementation. So here we are talking about what is the quality of the people you bring together, how good is your work plan, is this actually going to work, and have you appropriately allocated resources so that it can be done. Here many people are afraid that their proposal is too expensive, but sometimes also the criticism of evaluators is it's not expensive enough. So actually it's a frequent, there is a frequent criticism that it cannot be done with the available resources. You need to be relatively sure about that whatever you are proposing, and typically in terms of person months, not in terms of money, that this can be done, that this is enough for achieving the results. And then after all these criteria are evaluated by the individual experts, and this is calculated and results in a score for your project, then there is an evaluation committee, and then that decides on a final score based on these remote scores and the outcome of its discussion, also taking into consideration, if any, from the rebuttal phase. And then there is also an important point here, that typically the committee is different from the people who evaluated the committee. They may be invited, but in the end, it all results in a ranked list. Whenever there's the end of the budget is reached, all projects above that line are funded. So I think that's a straightforward procedure. And then you receive an evaluation summary report, which contains the score, some comments from the reports, maybe a summary comment and additional comments, probably including advice not to resubmit the proposal. So I wouldn't expect too much from the feedback. As you have seen from the procedure, it's bringing together different views. So the feedback you get may sometimes appear to be contradictory, but that lies in the nature of peer evaluation to some extent. And people will have different views. Also, the people that look at your proposal, although they will have an understanding of the area, I can grant you that. So I think the EIC, like the Commission, make a great effort in trying to bring together people who really understand what you're talking about. But then again, it's peers, it's different experts, and then we have different views and different backgrounds. And also the EIC makes an effort to bring together industry experts and research academic experts. So this is a tricky task. So there is a degree of disagreement maybe, but that's just how life is and how especially research funding works. So I think that's something you have to accept. The draft planning is, as I said, that for the Pathfinder Open program, it's the 7th of March, 5 p.m. Brussels time. Do not leave it to the 7th of March. If you're submitting, I would suggest that end of February is a good realistic deadline for your internal planning to submit the proposal and do everything else before end of February and then submit. Because systems are also sometimes not working in the last minute. So don't do that. But as much as I'm always emphasizing this, it's rarely followed. Although I think there is a bit of improvement recently. As I said, nearly everything, actually, I think everything that I have told you, well, maybe not everything, but most of the things I've told you are also on the webpage of the EIC Information Hub. There is a work program. Once it's published, there are frequently asked questions, and there's also a proposal template. and much more information that you will find online. Okay, I am a bit over my time now, but at least I hope that my Pathfinder part is a bit longer, and then the transition part is a bit shorter. So I think in total we will be in time. But the next part I want to cover is the Pathfinder challenges part. So this is the part of the program where the EIC defines topics top-down and comes together to, again, very much like open, with very similar criteria. It's new cutting-edge directions in science and technology to disrupt the market by creating innovative technological solutions, with the only difference that here we are talking about research that is within a topical field that is predefined. And also, interestingly, there is an indication of the technology readiness level, which is a bit different from the open part. It's TRL levels 2 to 4. So it's actually without basic research. Why is that? Well, it's easy to understand. If there wasn't at least a basic understanding of what the technology should be, what it should be about, you couldn't define the topic. So in that sense, basic research is excluded. But I wouldn't overemphasize that. I think it's more or less the same spectrum, a little bit further on top of the TRL levels. Again, very similar, both in terms of expected budget, size of the project. Cut-off date much later in 2023, expected to be in October. A little bit longer, which also makes sense because you also have to there is a bit more maybe previous research that you can build on. There is maybe a bit more in terms of state of the art that you need to take into account. So this is, I think it says currently 25 pages in the draft work program, but again, please double check that once the final version is out. So the work program here is really your Bible. This is the document against which you need to check your idea. There's not just a description of the topical area, there is also a description of the specific outcomes that are expected, and I will mention them. There is also usually a background document that explains a bit more when the call opens, which gives you a little bit also about, roughly the state of the art, some technical information, maybe relevant references. And I think it's important to understand that for both the open and the Pathfinder part, of course, your project is also expected to have relevant top-level scientific publications in open access. And again, a formal protection of the generated IP. So in that sense, they are similar. The main difference is the topic is predefined. I think I can largely, maybe at this point, go over this very quickly, because what the EIC are looking for is, again, the same as in the open. It is an ambitious idea. It is a clear vision. It is new deep tech, new technological solutions at early stage of development, with a high potential. So this is it. And in the end, the call will result in a set of proposals that will be also brought together. They will be asked to collaborate, at least to meet and exchange ideas, and maybe contacted by the program managers. This is also a bit important for the evaluation, because it also means that here, maybe more than in the open, there is also a consideration of, do we have duplications? Has everything been covered in terms of what this topic needs to address? You could strategically think about it, but that's maybe for the advanced proposer. Here you can also, for the Pathfinder challenge, you can also propose single legal entities or consortia, but again, that depends on the specific challenge. So again, please check against the text in the call. Typically, the minimum would be 2 independent legal entities from 2 different member states or associated countries. in the case of a single entity, a large company cannot be the sole proposer. But as I said, please, for the formal aspects, I would really encourage you to talk to your NCPs or read the documents very carefully. So in the current version of the program, 5 topics have been proposed that should be addressed. One is clean and efficient cooling. Then there is a rather complicated title, which basically is about digitalization for buildings, I would say. Then there is a topic on precision nutrition, one on responsible electronics, and one on solar energy harvesting for space applications. And I have a bit more on each of those topics, but I'm definitely not a specialist in all of these topics, so you need to carefully read those descriptions. But just very briefly, for you to see if this is anything you're interested in, clean and efficient cooling is obviously about the trying to target the issue that we have increasing an increase in energy consumption also from cooling in large parts of Europe, and this is trying to address this topic. So the conventionally, usually the topic is addressed using vapor compression as the most widely applied method for air conditioning. And the question is, can we do it differently and can we do it better? So this is about exploring new devices, new technologies for processes, components, materials for clean cooling. It ranges from transformational research that can displace those older technologies to computational modeling, maybe validating energy-intensive, low-temperature heat transfer processes, net zero cooling technologies for industry and the residential sector, ultra energy efficient operations and logistics along the cold supply chain. So here we are talking also about delivering cold to where it is consumed, new designs and concepts in special application areas, and unconventional refrigeration principles. Now, so this is roughly what the EIC is looking for. When you read the text in the work program, you will see that there is much more information than what I have summarized here. Now, how important are these descriptions? I think they are fairly important. So I think it's really you need to read them carefully, and you need to make sure you actually fit here. That doesn't mean you couldn't have an additional idea that's not addressed here. Yes, you can. If you are wiser than the text of the proposal, you can do it. But whatever you do, you need to make sure you also fit here. Yeah, so you need to, in one of those points, you should find yourself. You don't have to address all of them. That's actually quite impossible here. But at least for one, you need to be sure you're addressing this, you have a new idea, and you have an idea of how to change it. This is very important, because very often we see that people are trying to forcefully make their proposal fit to such a topic, which in the end then maybe doesn't work. So make sure you fit at least to one of those descriptions, and then if there is another interesting aspect that you want to address, go for it, that's fine. But make sure you cover what's written here, and also make sure that you're addressing one of the expected outcomes. So and the outcomes are specified in the text. They are, in this case, they are actually fairly clearly listed. That's not always the case, but here it really says, as an outcome, we want to see EU technological leadership in the cooling sector. That is relatively clear, although it can mean many things, but it really says there should be, through your project, there should be one part, and even if it's a niche, but where the EU is becoming a technological leader in that area. Or you need to give broad access to building comfort and health in living environment. So that's a very different thing. It's not so much EU technological leadership, that's broad access. Or increase the operational security of server and computing facilities, very different things. So you have to really read the text, and you have to understand what's needed. Again, you don't need to address all of those points. Most likely your research is going to address several of those points. And then you need to make sure in your proposal, that's my recommendation, to really explicitly address those expected outcomes, to say you will increase technological leadership, and you'll say why you are going to do this, and maybe even how much is this going to be, and by when, and how is this going to, so be fairly explicit about this, because if you do that, you're making the task of the evaluator easier, and it's very likely that the evaluator will hence support your idea. The second topic is this relatively long title of Architecture, Engineering and Construction Digitalization for a Novel Triad of Design, Fabrication and Materials. I think here you have a typical compromise text as the outcome of a political procedure, but it's, when you read it, it is actually, it's actually quite interesting to read. It's a very very nicely described challenge that concerns the fact that nearly half of all the greenhouse gas emissions are embodied in buildings, so that there is really a lot to think about in terms of, with an increasing population on the planet, how to lower greenhouse gas emissions, and how especially digitalization can help in achieving that. So the underlying idea is that there is digitalization supporting a new symbiotic triad, as it says in the text, of design processes, fabrication techniques, and maybe new materials. So the objectives are computational design, digital fabrication, and alternative materials, developing new tools to advancing the state of the art on, for example, physical simulation, but also 3D printing, and then maybe using new materials. And the expected outcomes in the end, what you're trying to achieve is proof of principle and validation of new scientific ideas, maybe new simulation techniques, maybe new 3D printing concepts, ensuring that our buildings are much better in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of greening the building sector on all levels, as the title suggests: architecture, engineering, and construction. And I think this is I think a very interesting topic to address. I think it's fairly well described in the work program. It's fairly clear about what it wants to achieve. Maybe there is a certain danger here that this results in incremental proposals, because of course the building sector, although this isn't true, but it's usually known for more incremental innovations. I think so. Here you need to make sure that what you're proposing really means a radical change, really has a degree of novelty that is not just the logical next step. But otherwise, I think it's fairly straightforward. Let me continue and go to the next topic, which is precision nutrition. So I think here again, the motivation is fairly clear. This is about, or is motivated by the fact that really nutrition lies at the root of many societal diseases, of many challenges in our society that have to do with diets that are characterized by high sugar and red meat consumption, and overly processed foods with a lot of additives, which in many cases have proven to be bad for human health. On the other hand, we would benefit from more plant-based diets and foods that are not too processed, but there are many questions and many issues arising from that observation, and it is not as straightforward as probably we would like to think, how to turn this into actual innovation in the market. So So here the objectives are, first of all, really also understanding a bit better the causal relationships between the diet, the microbiome, glycans, with a strong emphasis on factors with significant stratifying effect on human diet, provide scientific evidence. One of the problems that nutritional research has is its context dependence. So we can study single nutrients very well, but the study of 100 nutrients that we may take in is very difficult. So the question is, what could be the food ingredients, the processes, the additives that have detrimental effects, how to avoid them, how to, on the other hand, have beneficial effects, make sure that we harvest them and provide scientific evidence for them. And by laying the foundation for microbiome restoration strategies and understanding the links between diet and human health, that we prevent and alleviate consequences, for example, of obesity and other illnesses. So again, when you look at the expected outcome, it's fairly specific. It's fairly clear what this is trying to do, although the research is very much research oriented. So this is really, it tells you, here we are actually studying causal relationships, but then the impact we are trying to achieve is on the level of obesity. So whatever the proposal is, it needs to link these two, which may not be that easy to do, is my guess, but I'm not an expert in this field, so I'm not going to talk much more about this. Rather, go to responsible electronics, where I feel a bit more at home. So obviously, electronics is a huge challenge. The sheer amount of how it's growing in our society, and the Commission has taken steps to really foster electronics initiatives. Some of you may know there is microelectronics investments in Europe that is quite significant. And so here is one challenge that really tries to address the material side of it largely, but also the process side of making sure that electronics is not too environmentally harmful. So it's really about drastically reducing the environmental load of the electronics industry by shifting from what has been done for the last decades to new innovative methods and materials with lower environmental impact. And there are also EU policies behind it that if you submit a proposal here, you should know what is stated in the, for example, the EU Climate Action Plan. We should also understand what the Commission has been doing in its microelectronics initiatives. This objective addresses materials, processes, and also advanced applications. And really, I think it's relatively clear. This is moving towards green electronics, towards new properties that are less harmful for the environment, because, for example, they reduce our dependency also on critical raw materials, but also because they are sustainable, because they have low environmental footprint, and are developed recurring to the life cycle thinking approach. So here I would say the outcome is a bit more openly formulated, but it's really from reading the objectives, it becomes clear what is wanted here. And then finally, the in-space solar power harvesting and novel propulsion approaches. I think that is quite an interesting topic, maybe a bit surprising. So this is about harvesting the solar power as a source of nearly unlimited source of energy for future spacecraft who will need innovative propulsion capabilities. So this is really about finding a way to collect solar energy in space and maybe transmit it to make sure that we achieve in-space mobility with game-changing novel propulsion methods and energy to be utilized for this propulsion. So I think this is fair to say that this is a specialist topic. It's really about solar energy harvesting in space for spacecraft. So I guess as a fairly small group of people who this addresses. The expected outcomes are clearly described. I think it's design and laboratory validation of concepts for developing this technology. And again, this is moving towards more eco-friendly, innovative green propulsion systems. So whatever you do, you need to argue that this is what you are addressing. I don't have to say much about the challenge evaluation because it is very similar to the open evaluation. So criteria and thresholds are very similar. There is nearly the same procedure. Maybe one aspect, I have briefly mentioned it, is that from the point of the view of the EIC, it's not just about the single project, it's again about bringing together a collection of projects here that address the issue. So there is a bit of, when selecting the project, there is a little bit of thinking in terms of the portfolio as well. And the program managers here have a more active role. They are really trying to bring together expertise and they are trying to support the project more actively. Now, what in the end, with trying to bring them together, exchanging their views, integrating projects towards reaching those ambitious targets, especially in the Pathfinder Challenges program, and supporting them, also maybe identifying that's perhaps an underestimated issue in the EIC program. They are also trying to identify regulatory issues or legislative gaps, and the Commission, you might say, is very good at identifying legal gaps, but really they are, and they have the competence to addressing those issues and understand that many industries, including, for example, the biotech industry, need also a good regulatory framework. So this is also something they are looking into and which can help innovation in many cases. So I mentioned very briefly the timing is again a draft, but it should be around 18th of October 2023 for the Pathfinder Challenges part. And so that is much later in the year. There is still a bit of time, I would say. If you feel you have something to contribute to one of those challenges, I think now is the time to think about which ideas could make sense, to maybe contact one or two partners. And so I think there's sufficient time for that, but don't delay it too much. And again, information is available on the EIC Information Hub if you're interested in those challenges. Okay, I've talked a lot now, and I'm sure there are questions that I'll try to do my best to answer. Now I would probably need some help where we were. Tarek, I need your help with the question about the single person proposal. So although I could say that as far as I understand, natural persons are eligible in principle, but I wouldn't recommend it. So this is definitely, this should be an exception, really. Yeah.
I can also comment on that. Natural persons are allowed in EIC Accelerator, but
yes,
up to yes, but for the Pathfinder and Transition, they are not eligible at the moment.
Many thanks. Yes, that is an important correction of what I think I actually had on my slide. And also, really, you have to think about whether you can achieve the impact here. So typically, even an SME, you need to, although SMEs are absolutely allowed and they are welcome, but also there needs to be a good embedding, a good context, that it's not just about the single SME. That is very difficult to argue here. As compared to Horizon Europe, what are the main pros and cons choosing the EIC? I guess one is consortia constraint. Well, yes, that is one. I think the nature is very different. Most of the framework program calls, first of all, are topical, of course. So that is a bit more like the EIC challenges part of the program, and there is not much open. So that the open part is definitely something that you do not have otherwise very often. And it's also this I think this feature of bringing both research but with a clear technological exploitation area vision to the table. I think that is what's special about it. Yeah, I think that is an important distinguishing feature. Yeah, it's yeah. Otherwise, I think in general, I think it's a good program. It's a very nice program. It has very clear rules. It has very clear boundaries. What are the main difference from FET, and is FET transposed in the new pillar? So it builds on the EIC Pathfinder, very much builds on the experiences from FET. It is sort of, if you want, a slightly more elaborate version of FET. As I said, it is maybe a bit early to fully say what the differences are. There have been, in the debates beforehand, there have been concerns from the research side that a good program like FET now becomes diluted with too much innovation-mindedness. I am not sure that this is the case. I think from the project selection that we have seen in the first two calls, it is still very much, a FET spirit is still very much there, maybe even more so in some areas, maybe even a bit more risk-taking. But definitely here, the idea is also to give you this pipeline from FET to the next step, that's all I can say. I think it is a bit too early to really assess, but it is, of course, the precise rules are also a bit different. Yeah, not much, but they are a bit different. I don't know, Tarek, if you want to say anything about this, or
no, actually, you clearly mentioned, and from my perspective, Pathfinder is new FET. That's my point, because there was FET open projects, FET proactive projects, and now we have Pathfinder open and Pathfinder challenges, and so it is the new version. But maybe from the Commission perspective, the main difference is FET was under another pillar, the second pillar in the Horizon 2020, and they took it into the third pillar, Innovative Europe pillar. It is a clear message that these projects must have a vision of a technological development. That's the main point, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think indeed the organizational setup is probably what's most different. But as I said, the early concerns of the researchers that now this would all become just innovation and just market oriented is not true from looking at the project selection. So it's still very much early ideas, early technology, early science validation. So in that sense, it is very similar. There is a question which I'm not sure I fully understand. What are the repercussions of high risk? And does TÜBİTAK keep data about the outcomes of research? Well, I think, Tarek, you have to mention that.
No. how I don't know how to comment on that, but
no, you don't.
This is
right?
not this is not TÜBİTAK's program. Maybe it is better to mention it about.
So,
this is the Commission's program. Yes,
exactly. So obviously, of course, there is an interest in what the results of your project are on many levels, including, I guess, TÜBİTAK. But there is not a list of project failures or outcomes that didn't materialize, and so no, that's not how it works. Is there a limitation to TRL levels of the project proposal? Yes, I mentioned that. Well, there's not. I don't think it's a formal limitation, but in practice, it very clearly says for Pathfinder open TRL levels 1 to 4. And for Pathfinder challenges, TRL levels 2 to 4. But I mean, it is a limitation in the sense that you can be pretty sure if you are addressing very close to market research TRL levels 7 or 8, then this will be looked at very skeptically and is probably not going to fly in those parts of the program. So in that sense, there is an implicit limitation, but this is not an explicit formal check. When looking into the slide, who would be the median evaluator out of 4 people? Yes, good. I don't know. They just calculate the mathematical median of the scores. I hope that makes it clear. It doesn't in practice. It just means, what it really means is there is no consensus phase. In other programs, you have a consensus, or you used to have. Nowadays, I don't think it's frequent anymore. You used to have a consensus phase where the evaluators had to agree on a score. Here, we just take the median, which is a bit different from the average for good reasons. If you think about it, because an outlying evaluator is less relevant than those who agree more on the score. I think it's a good idea. There is never I think there is no one mathematical formula that will do most justice to the project, but this is a reasonable way of approaching the problem. I hope I made myself clear here. Will there be any special call for experts? That's a question I cannot answer. Tariq, is there a special call for EIC evaluators? I don't think so.
No, there's not a special call for that, but maybe by this question I would like to mention that I wrote an answer to one of the questions, that we will have an event on 21st of November in TÜBİTAK premises, and it will be a hybrid event which will be broadcasted, as far as I know. So it will be specifically based on the expert evaluators' experience. So I strongly advise everyone to follow that event.
Yeah. Then there is a question about someone who has already a project on clean and efficient cooling using photonic processes, focusing apparently on the computational modeling. Very interesting topic. If we apply for EIC, can we still be involved? You can be involved in as many grants as you want. It only needs to be credible and plausible. My joke would be careful what you wish for. But no, of course you can, but of course you cannot do the same research, and you should indeed not propose the same research again. I'm assuming that's not what you want to do. There is actually a fair degree of exchange and knowledge between even if it's now different agencies and bodies who are managing the program, but they do know and talk about, they love their projects, they talk about their projects, so they know what's going on. Even, I would say, between national agencies and the commission occasionally when projects are really interesting. So don't submit research twice. But that, I guess, is not what you want to do anyway. No, you can have as many projects as you want. And of course, it's recommendable to submit because you have a track record now, and you have an experience, and you have partners. So go for it. Are there any penalties for resubmitting? Not entirely sure. So resubmission is a difficult topic in all programs, but it's especially also difficult in EIC topics because of the time lag, because it takes maybe a year before you can resubmit, not in the cutoff date schemes, but when there is just one deadline. So, and then the question arises, after a year, do you still have the same understanding of the technology and what you want to do? What do you need to adapt? Why was your proposal rejected in the first place? Have you were these good reasons? Do you believe that they are that you have addressed them now? So there is no case I know of where a simple resubmission would work. You nearly always have to come with a different version of the proposal. If nothing else, you have to update the state of the art, but very often you change the partners, you change the way you look at the proposal. So there's never a clear resubmission. Occasionally it works. It does occasionally. Actually, in many cases, proposals are better when they are resubmitted. But as I said, they're never the same. Considering EU expressed that it wants to boost its semiconductor production from any extra incentives planned by the ECT for electronics, not in the EIC schemes, but there are other schemes where there is where semiconductor electronics industry is explicitly addressed. Yeah, I think this is something you have to look into other EC programs, and I'm sure your NCP can point you to the other programs, but not in EIC. High risk, high gain criteria. Sometimes the proposal is found medium risk, low gain. What would make it high risk, high gain? This is impossible to answer without the. I cannot give you a clear example. I just remember some topics where where it was clear that I don't know, in the old days. When we were talking about data storage using molecules at first, this was high risk, high gain. It was high gain because if you could do it, you could store enormous amounts of information in DNA or other complex molecules. But it is also high risk because it comes with many technological challenges, such as the stability, such as the questions of computation with bacteria or with proteins. So this is a good example. It's if you can do it, it's fantastic, but it raises so many questions and technological challenges that the question is, can you do it? So this is a typical case that I can think of, but it is very context dependent. It depends very much on what the area is we are talking about. Does the proposal contain some breakthrough or completely novel? I'm not sure what you mean, but I hope I made it clear that a project needs to be novel. It needs to absolutely have novel components. It needs to address aspects that have not been addressed before. It needs to also lead to new knowledge, very simply. I think an EIC Pathfinder project needs to deliver new knowledge. It's also clearly described in the program text that there should be publications, including scientific publications. So as much as it is motivated by bringing things to the market, there still needs to be good research that leads to publications in outstanding journals or very good journals, let's say. Is the patent pending acceptable as IP property for the application? So this is maybe a bit of a misunderstanding. It is okay to have a patent pending if you already have submitted a patent for what you are trying to do. It could be very well the case that there's a patent pending and you are now proposing to realize this technology, to try it out, to build whatever it is that has never been done before. But it is not a necessary requirement. When I mentioned IP in my presentation, I was mostly referring to the fact that in your project, you should make sure that the IP, that the results you're going to develop in the project, that they should be protected. That you have a strategy to protect the IP in order to later utilize it. So that was the point I was trying to make. But if you already have an idea described in the patent, then that's also fine, as long as it's still reasonably new, as long as it hasn't been deployed at any, because then it's probably not a Pathfinder project. Health topics are limited in the declared challenge drafts, which is discouraging. Depends on what your area background is, I guess. Could you comment on this issue? So personally, I think that in the open part of the program, there have been a good degree of bio and health topics. So in the open Pathfinder Open, there was, I think, a good degree. Otherwise, I cannot really comment on it. it is it's a wild mix, I think, as you have seen, from space to bioelectronics, as from space to green electronics, from buildings to nutrition, which is a typical in the Pathfinder challenges, which is a typical compromise of all sorts of things. So that's all I can say. It's not going to be the same every year. It's going to change, but maybe what you have in your mind is something that could be submitted under the open part of the program. Oh, is another follow-up on the median question. I hope I didn't hang out my neck towards statistics too much here. The outcome was they didn't have consensus. Yeah. Yes. So basically, the question is about whether there should be a consensus score or not, and I think it's a different approach. I think the approach is more like what you have in typical peer evaluation in other areas of science. I mean, typically when you submit a paper to a journal, you do not get a consensus vote. What you get is 2 or 3 opinions that may be very different from each other, and sometimes they agree and sometimes they disagree. Sometimes they understand what you have written and sometimes they don't. So I think this is the way to look at this. The consensus approach, I'm pretty sure, and I've taken part in many consensus discussions, it has some advantages. It gives the idea of a very objective assessment of a proposal, but maybe overly so. So the disadvantage of the consensus approach is that it tends to equalize the differences in the opinions between different experts maybe too much. So, I mean, in the end, at this level of scientific, but now I'm talking as a philosopher, which I'm also are, you know, but at this stage of the type of research, it needs to be peer evaluation. There is no, I don't think there is, it would be fair to say there is a uniform assessment and an objective truth about what you're trying to do. All you can do is you can ask other experts what they think, and then they will tell you, and they may or may not agree. So in that sense, I think it's a possible way of doing it. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I agree that it is different from the consensus view, which tries to give a very objective image. But the main difference is that then the differences in the opinions of the evaluators are kind of eliminated. And I think there is a certain value also in seeing the differences. So it's maybe not as nice as a proposer, because you get conflicting opinions, but on the other hand, I also think it has some value. So I think both methods are possible for this type of research. In the end, it's if you like, a political decision. Yeah, but I don't think there's a scientific answer to this. Good. How are we doing in terms of time? I think I'm a bit behind, but not too bad, right? 10 minutes. Is that correct? Yes, I think so. Okay, then let me proceed to the last part of my presentation, which is the EIC transition. So now this is a topic that maybe is a bit more of a specialist topic, in the sense that this is not for everybody, because in order to get an EIC transition grant, you need to have already a project such as a Pathfinder project in order to be able to submit an EIC transition part. So there are some limits here. But in principle, the EIC transition part is really the next step. So this is innovation activities that go beyond experimental proof of principle. It is maturation of the technology, validation of the technology, to bring it closer to the market, to bring it closer to industry. Again, like Pathfinder, the model is we have an open scheme where there are no predefined thematic priorities. So it's nearly any field of science. There are some exceptions. You can, for example, in the area of nuclear fission, or you cannot come with military proposals. So there are some exceptions, but by and large, it's open to all fields of science. And then there is the challenges part where there is in predefined thematic areas of emerging and strategic technologies. The EIC says, here we know we have a scientific base. We have already achieved in previous programs, EIC, Horizon, framework programs, we have already established a certain level of knowledge, and we would take this to the next step. And this is what's described in the challenges parts. So really the important part here to remember is that this builds on results of previous EIC and other programs. If you do not have those projects, if you didn't have them previously, then for the most part, you cannot submit a proposal. It's a bit more complicated because theoretically you could also buy into a result that someone else produced in a Horizon project, for example. So you don't have to be the person who actually did the project, but the results, whatever you're doing, needs to be based on those previous results. So in that sense, there is a natural limitation here to a smaller group of eligible researchers or research topics in a sense. So transition funds innovation activities. There's a subtle difference to what I said before, where I said research and innovation. So here it says innovation activities that go beyond the experimental proof of principle in laboratory to support A, the maturation and validation of your technology in the lab, but also in relevant application environments, and B, the development of a business case and business model towards the innovation's future commercialization. Maybe that deserves a bit of explanation. So is this research? Well, yes, it is, but it is a different type of research. It is not so much basic research. It's not so much a research where we are trying to do this science to technology breakthrough. I think here we already should know that in principle, this can work. Now the question is, can it work at a large scale? Can it work in an industrial environment? Can it work in practice? Is it stable enough? Is it good enough? Is it cheap enough? You know, so all of these are the questions that maybe you don't yet know. So in that sense, of course, it is research, but it's a different type of research. And also you're probably now understanding a bit, trying to understand a bit better what are the applications where you can use it. Sometimes in early tech, you have an idea, you have a vision of where this might go, but then you realize, okay, this is really not working for this precise vision, but really it's great for something else. I've personally worked in a project that was like this. What we wanted to do originally didn't work, but it was great for something else. So why not? Yeah, in that sense, that is what EIC transition can do for you. And it's also for understanding the business side of it. It's one aspect if you understand the technology, if you understand how this needs to be, how this can work, but it's an entirely different question how you can make money with it, what is the business model? Are you trying to sell this? Is this something that you license? Is this going to be rolled out in 100 laboratories across the world or throughout Europe? Or is this something that you are producing? What is your business model? How is this going to scale? How is this going to change the world and have the impact that you want to have? So that's the question. And EIC transition also will give you an opportunity to investigate. And again, this is a research element here to understand also the business side of it. Maybe that's something for a business and economics university to also assist, or maybe that's something for startups to explore. So it depends also a bit on who are the actors here. Grants are of up to 2.5 million and more. to validate and demonstrate the technology, and otherwise, as I said, it is very similar to Pathfinder in this open and topical scheme. So this is quite important. The EIC transition can only build on results that have been generated by either EIC Pathfinder projects, by EIC pilot Pathfinder projects, which was a predecessor to the current program, to H2020 FET projects, FET Open, FET Proactive, FET Flagships, to ERANET calls under the FET work program, and there is a specific list in the work program, to ERC proof of concept projects, that is perhaps an interesting element, to EDF research projects, but only for the civil focus. So EDF is the defense program of the European Union. So that's quite interesting, because although this is a military program, but of course, many technologies can also be applied maybe with not a military aspect or target. And if you do that, then you can use EIC transition funding. And for EIC transition challenge, so where the topics are defined for all H2020 and Horizon Europe projects. And then there are some, I'm not going to go through all the details here. Please talk to your NCP whether your project is actually eligible. So there are some constraints. In most cases, it shouldn't be a very old project. But what is perhaps interesting is, as I said, you do not necessarily have to be a participant of the original project. So this is also for taking up results that someone else has produced, in principle. Of course, then there are questions of IP and maybe profit sharing or whatever, but in principle, this is possible. Again, this is 100% funded of eligible costs. The grants are between 500,000 and 2.5 million. Typical duration is a bit shorter, as you would perhaps expect, between 1 and 3 years. There should be roughly 60 million, a bit more for the open part in the call. And there are several cutoff dates. So one would be in April and one in September for submitting your proposal. Again, not a very long proposal, 20 pages. And you can also come as a small consortium with 2 to 5 independent legal entities, or as a single legal entity. But if you are a single legal entity, you cannot be a large company, which I think is clear why this is the case. It's for competition law mostly. So the transition is a fairly new part. That is a bit different from, because we have talked about FET before. So this is different. Now here we are actually talking about a closer to market scheme. It was first tested in 2021, and really it's about bridging this gap from the proof of concept to a viable business case. So naturally, we are also addressing the higher technology readiness levels in the scheme that I've shown before. So it is, but again, it is about increasing the maturity of the technology, maybe to technology levels 5 to 6. So this is then more in the direction of the validation activities. This is, as I said, bringing a lab prototype maybe to a industrial prototype. It really, again, depends very much on the field, what area we are talking about, but this is the idea. And also it is, of course, here now we are a bit more interested in the business plan. This is not just the industrialization of a technology. This is also now about making it work financially. So this I would strongly suggest, needs to be a part of the proposal. You need to think about how can you make money with it, which involves questions such as, do we have the rights? Are there any legal constraints of doing this? Can we roll it out broadly? Can we bring it to a market really? Yeah, so there are many of these aspects which in some cases can be showstoppers. In biotech, it's a frequent showstopper, but in other cases, maybe the constraints are easier, such as in digital, typically. So really, Here the idea is, because probably the 500,000 to 2.5 million will not be enough money to roll this out at an industrial scale. But what it should do is it should give you enough funds to make your technology investment ready for someone else to invest. So that then there can be entrepreneurs coming in, maybe you can license it, maybe there can be venture capital funding and so on and so forth. So in many cases, it may already be enough, but in some cases, you may need much more money to do what you want to do. So as I said, really here again, the TRL level is very different from the Pathfinder program. These are now the development levels, technology validated in relevant environments and also demonstrated in relevant environments, maybe leading towards a prototype, not quite in the operational. What is the difference here? It's maybe a bit difficult to understand if you're not used to these way of talking. So a system prototype demonstration in an operational environment would be a prototype that works more or less continuously in a plant. So that is a prototype still, because it's the first of its kind, but it is actually working in its environment. So that is maybe not what you need to do, but you need to demonstrate the technology. You have an experiment that demonstrates it's doable there. Maybe it's definitely not in routine use, but you're using it in an industrial setting. This is really what the target should be here. And so as an outcome, what you get out of this of a transition project, this would be a technology that is demonstrated that it's also effective, a business model and business plan for developing the market, and that allows future uptake, for instance, through an adequate formal protection of the IP. So now you may actually have the patent, or you may have a patent pending, so that at the end of this transition project, you are ready for the next stage. And this could be an accelerator project, which I'm not going to talk about today, which could be other sources of funding, which could be an investment from a venture capitalist. This could be licensing or collaboration agreements, maybe with someone else. Maybe you are not actually the one because you're not understanding the market well enough, but you could license the technology or other routes to market deployment. So here are some examples of what you could do, examples as they are used by the European Innovation Council. So this could be a research project. As I said, it's still possible that this is research. Then it would be research that may develop the technology towards specific applications, a fairly general technology, but now look at where could this be used, in which application sectors. While improving also the market readiness, while writing software, building tools around it, making all of this more self-contained, more off the shelf in a sense. So second version then would be maturing previous research. So for example, a small and medium-sized enterprise would see a market opportunity to apply the results of, maybe it has heard about a previous result of an H2020 project, a Horizon 2020 project, and thinks, well, that's actually a good idea. And then it applies for an EIC Pathfinder, for an EIC transition grant in order to mature the research, and then maybe use a license arrangement or something. Or finally, it can also be used for creating a product. So maybe a team of researchers who are entrepreneurially minded want to select maybe a sub-project result, maybe not the main result, maybe just very often there are side results in a larger project that can be used to develop a business model or create a startup. So that is also possible. But as I said, it needs to be built on this rather limited list of European programs and its results. And you need to still be in the right technology readiness level steps here. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain at this point the evaluation again. So there is the 3 criteria as before. It's excellence, impact, and implementation. It's very similar, but as you would expect, now impact is more important. Now we are also, so we're talking about the credibility of the impacts, about the economic and societal benefits, the investment readiness and go-to-market strategy. That's an important aspect of it. So does the proposal make the technology investment ready? As I said, at the end of the project, is this something that other people can use? It's also a bit more concrete when you read the implementation criterion. It's a bit more concrete on how the project is organized. It's a bit more about KPIs, about milestones. So also at this level, it becomes a bit more commercial, if you like. Yeah. So the assessment is different. It is as you would expect for such a proposal. And also you can expect that maybe there are more business people involved in evaluating it, not just pure researchers. I think I will skip this. The award criteria for at the second evaluation step. Just to mention, there is a second evaluation step after the first step evaluation, where now we have 3 evaluation experts that score against the criteria, and then there is also a resubmission procedure, which is perhaps a bit different from the Pathfinder, where no such explicit resubmission procedure exists. So here you have a chance to resubmit with also possibility to make improvements. And there is a face-to-face interview in case you are successful in the first step. So I think this is also interesting. It gives you a chance to better explain your idea. It gives you a chance to give some more details than what you have written in the proposal. And it's about, but then again, it also has disadvantages because you need to convincingly pitch your proposal. And you will be asked questions by the jury, and then you get a go or no go decision. Now, in some cases, you may not be selected for funding because of a lack of money. Then you get a seal of excellence, which you can maybe use in the national agency. But I think that is something that I don't have to explain very much here. Maybe one aspect again, this IPR agreement. As I said, proposals must build on results from previous projects. So it is important that in your project, there is a declaration by the IP owner of that previous project that you're allowed to do what you're trying to do, of course. So you cannot just take any research result from any previous Horizon 2020 project and then say, I want to take this to the market. No, you need to have an agreement with typically probably the coordinator of that project that you can do that in case you are not the person. But I think it's an interesting idea that if you are very entrepreneurial minded, you can just scan previous projects and see, is there anything interesting they did? Do you trust that the results are worth it, that they actually work to the extent that they are described? And then can you take those results and do something more interesting with it and bring it to the market? So I think this is quite novel and innovative in itself. So again, as I said, Transition Open is open to all areas, provided that they build on previous results of those projects. And then we have the Transition Challenge area where there are predefined areas. Now, of course, these areas are a bit more tricky to define in the sense that here the EIC needs to be convinced that those topics lend themselves for investment and for bringing it closer to the market. So basically what they do is they scan through the previous results and say, okay, look here, there's really an area of technologies where we have made progress, where we had previous calls, where there is something on the table or in the drawer, if you like, maybe even IP, but we haven't really brought it to the market. Let's give it a try again. Let's see if we can take the necessary next step. And in this call 2023, they are going to identify 3 topics for which this will be the case. So there is going to be micro nano bio devices for medical and medical research applications. There is environmental intelligence and chip scale optical frequency comms. Now, I will only very briefly show these to you because I think really here it's evident you need to read those texts. You need to understand not just what's written in the program document. Here you need to really look at what are those previous results. What is it that you can take to the market now? So, for example, the full-scale micro nano bio devices for medical and medical research applications, they aim at realizing and validating fully functional integrated micro nano bio devices or systems that use micro nano bio modules, which have been developed under previous EU projects, and where now the focus is on integration or refining the existing modules to realize a transitionable investment-ready product, or develop a device or system that leads to higher impact technological development, such as acceleration of the discovery of principles underlying cell or pathogen biology by means of advanced milli and microfluidics, or the automation of clinical workflows. And if you have been in this field for quite some time, you will remember that, for example, the microfluidics topics, they have been around for quite some time in European Commission programs. I think, if I remember it correctly, but don't take my word for it, I think they've also been part of the FET program and definitely other programs. So these are topics where results should be available. And if you happen to have one of those results, or if you're interested in those results, this call gives you an opportunity to take it to the next step. The next step, again, clearly described, is basically the realization of a significant progress in those systems, positioning Europe as a leader in micro nano bio ecosystems, or creating such an ecosystem, and also coming up with a clear exploitation strategy for these technologies. Environmental intelligence is the second topic. So that again targets materials, processes, and systems. Could be very much anything, as long as they help prevent, reduce, or eliminate environmental contaminants which are present in the air, the soil, or the hydrosphere. That's technologies that, without using critical raw materials, enable synergies between sensors and AI at the interface of environment and sustainability and data science to allow new monitoring schemes or remediation actions, or solutions that detect, combine, analyze, and interpret data, including signals of ecosystems that are stressed through environmental pollutants. And finally, technologies with minimized carbon footprints based on a full life cycle analysis in order to protect the environment from contaminations. That's a relatively broad topic. So here you have actually a lot of options in this environmental intelligence. Basically what it is a chunk of money, opportunity to really build on those previous results from Horizon projects and other fields, to take them into the market to realize environmental intelligence. So much of it is on sensing, AI improvements, but it's also on the processes. Yeah? But it's relatively broad in my understanding, with the expected outcome of reducing the pollution, of realizing new and better policies and also processes to promote an environmental friendly monitoring schemes that hit the market. Thirdly and finally, customer-driven innovative space technologies and services. So again, this is addressing a space topic. It's about maturing novel technologies. Sorry, this is the wrong title. My apologies. This is I was wondering where this comes from. This is, just give me a second. I need to make sure that I give you the right title. For some reason, I didn't, and I know what the reason is. It's chip scale optical frequency combs, which for some reason I didn't change the title here. So really this should read EIC Transition Challenge 2.3 chip scale optical frequency combs. So this is about photonics research, photonics integrated frequency combs, which are a novel class of on-chip frequency combs, which are generated by nonlinear parametric gains or other effects, a bit different from laser frequency combs, which, because they are more compact, they offer large mode spacing. If you are a specialist in this field, you will know much better than me what this is about. The aim is to advance or mature novel technologies for chip scale frequency combs that can be applied, to mature the comb technologies so that they can be integrated with other functional elements, and to exploit the precision of optical frequency combs, which this technology offers for multi-channel light source or optical communication, for highly efficient sensors, or even optical atomic clocks on a chip, if you have to. So these are it's a rather relatively specific topic, quite opposite from the previous one. Again, outcomes relatively clear: foster skills, talent, and innovation in semiconductor technologies for using advanced materials of photonics and microelectronics in building on this technology. So that being said, I'm nearly at the end of this presentation, which is good because I'm losing my voice. There will be two cutoff deadlines for these schemes, for both the Transition Open and the Challenges scheme. It's going to be in April and in September most likely, but again, check against the final version of the work program. So again, a bit of time, but not too much. April is fairly soon, so you may want to start thinking about this. More information is available and will be available once the program is out. It's a bit difficult for me to predict when the program is going to be published, because it's kind of ready but not officially decided. So in the coming weeks or months, we'll see. And I think this is what I wanted to say. So thank you very much for the attention. There's still quite a few people here. Happy to take questions if there are any. I think there are no open questions, which...
Eric, I just want to mention one point. I couldn't catch it from your presentation, but most probably Pathfinder will be open to all funded projects. Pathfinder challenges will be open to all projects funded under Horizon 2020 thematic calls. Yep. So it is.
You mean transition?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Transition challenges. Yes, transition challenges. The 3 topics under transition challenges will be open to all projects supported under Horizon 2020. It's worth mentioning, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a real opportunity. This may be a bit difficult to get into the communities, I think, because it's not something they are used to. But I think this is very interesting, and especially I like this idea of building maybe on even someone else's project, or maybe if you are a partner, have been a partner in a larger project, but no one else really was interested in taking the idea further. I think this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, we don't have any waiting questions. So Kemal Bey, do we need to keep the system open for questions, or do you need that?
For any potential question from our participants, we can keep the transmission maybe for 10 minutes alive and
okay.
Otherwise,
then
otherwise we are happy to answer your question also offline. Tarek is your competent expert, especially more than me on the administration and bureaucratic side. I can tell you a bit more if you want about the evaluation. But as I said, I don't think there are many secrets here. Don't overestimate the secrets. Most evaluators are really interested in the project in terms of their technical content. When we do this, we are really interested in good projects that make us believe in what the proposers are trying to do. It's a very factual progress. It's a very sincere project, and it's also a process that has been refined over decades of research. So I personally have a high credibility, or believability in the sense that I believe in the process. Yeah. So I think it's a fair process overall, as fair as peer evaluation can ever be.
So I think we can close down the session, and the Zoom may be open for any further questions. Then the team can direct those questions to us, I guess. So thank you very much, Eric, for your very nice, very informative presentations, very comprehensive presentations. And for the participants, we also thank you for those who are still with us. And would you like to add something else, Eric?
No, just as I said, I will produce a PDF of my presentation and provide it for you. Maybe Tarek, I think there was one mistake on my slide, wasn't there? Wasn't there on, maybe I will say, can we do as follows? I'll send you the presentation. You have a quick look at it, because I think there was one condition of participation which I got wrong in one. I don't know which. I think it was in the.
Okay, if you can mention in your email that I can check it.
And then you check it, and we'll disseminate the corrected version.
Great.
Good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yes, exactly. Happy to get the recording as well. I think it will be done by the team. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Cheers.